Hello, chess friends. Mike Coplage, Coach Royal Rooks Chess Club, coming to you. Today we're going to take a look at examples of pins. If you haven't seen the video on the pin, then you probably want to stop and go watch that video first. The software I'm using today is from Convecta. You can find it at chessok.com. It's called Peshka, P-E-S-H-K-A. That's the engine that runs the courses, and just to give you an idea, there's a lot of courses that you can purchase. All fantastic stuff. Guaranteed if you use these programs, you will increase your ratings. Here we have a bishop pin. There's the bishop, and it's pinned by this bishop. Of course, this bishop, the white bishop, on f3 could certainly take the black bishop on d1. It is, of course, it is black to move. And the move, the first move, is queen to g2 check. And now you can win the bishop at this point. The neat thing about Peshka, it also gives you, as you can see, some other lines. What happens if the king moves to h5 or to f4. Now, when I first looked at this before I started the recording, I said, well, that'd be easy. I'd probably just go ahead and probably just take the bishop. Problem is, the queen down here in a8 is eyeing itself up on this particular pawn. So that's a potential problem. So the solution the computer gives, and I'm not so certain that just taking the bishop is such a bad idea, by the way. Probably with the queen. The computer's recommending that you check and see where you see the king moves to g4. And then to take with the queen, and then it's over. And of course, the king is going to take, but then you can see that your pawn will easily outrun the king. And of course, game one for black. The second pin is an interesting one because it's not, as I talked about in the video, being an absolute or a relative pin, but it is a pin because if the piece under attack moves, it's actually checkmate. Now, that should give you a start into finding the solution to this puzzle. I'll give you a minute. Yeah, the move here is interesting. It's queen to f3. Now you're saying, well, that doesn't really pin the rook down, but it does, because if the rook decides to move, let's just move it there for kicks, then checkmate. So essentially the rook is pinned. And this is a different kind of pin, because it really isn't, I don't know if I would I wouldn't classify it as an absolute. I'm not sure I would classify it as a relative pin by the definitions I used in the other video, but it definitely was a pin because that rook's not going anywhere because it's checkmate. Let's take another look. Now you will notice up here it does say pinning combinations. So they're taking the pinning and adding a little spice to it. Do you see the solution to this one? Do note that white's king, it's black to move, white's king is pretty darn open. I'll give you a second. Okay, the move to win is rook to b2. And again, if you want to see why going to g1 is a bad idea, you'll see why. It's because it's a quick checkmate. Now the rook, the black rook, has now pinned the white rook on d2. All the queen has to do is, you saw it go by pretty quickly, I should be able to slow it down. The queen comes to d1. So now the rook can take at b2, but of course, then you're sacking your queen. We can go back here and see this is a very easy checkmate. Once you solve the puzzle, you can go back and and do all kinds of interesting things with the puzzle. Maybe I should have entitled this video as, let me fix this for you, as pin combinations, because we are looking at different types of pins than the two that I discussed in the video, because the answer here is quite interesting. You move the pawn forward, the bishop takes, because it's a fork on the king, on the queen, and excuse me, and the bishop, and then simply the queen moves over. The bishop is technically pinned, because if the bishop moves, the piece. And then it gets even worse. Now you fork the bishops. Let's go back. Of course, if you just simply move, then free piece. Different type of pin, similar concept. Let me switch gears for about 4 tasks here, because you can fight against a pin. Notice the bishop on g4 has the f3 knight pinned. It's white to play. This is out of a classic game. I know I've seen this in a game, but very intriguing. See if you can figure out how to exploit the pin. Actually, it's knight takes knight. Bishop takes the queen. Now, before you get worried about it, remember that capturing the king is more important than capturing a queen. You come down, check, and checkmate. There it is, 1847 Falkbeer. Here's another example of exploiting a pin. And it all has to do with the fact that you'll notice this does happen in queen pawn openings, so do be careful of it. White thinks he's got the upper hand here, but notice how his king is really exposed on this diagonal. And of course, black has that bishop to move. But of course, this bishop can come back and block. Knight takes knight. Bishop will take the queen. That's great. You don't care. You say, fine. And it goes a little quickly, but I'll slow it down. Bishop takes d2 with check. King takes d2. And then king takes bishop. And you'll notice that you are a piece up. So just because you have a pin, don't think that your opponent can't get out of it. Or when you're pinned, don't give it up so quickly. Here's an interesting one to take a look at. See if you can find it. Go ahead and pause the recording if you need to. Okay. Knight e4. Now you notice the computer brings the bishop back quickly. We'll take a look at that in a second. The next move is bishop takes bishop. And notice he takes back with the f2 pawn, and that opens up this little short diagonal for a check. Knight comes in and takes. Now, when the knight comes out to f3, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm going to lose my knight. And a knee-jerk reaction might be to bring the queen backwards. Retreat it. But you have an answer here. You can come across. Because now black is in check, so even no matter what he does at this point, whether he moves his king, if he decides to block with the queen, that's fine. You just take it. Take. And you can snag this rook in the corner. We'll go back to this move. What happens if bishop takes queen? Well, then we have to check with the bishop. This is just similar to the one before. Of course, if he moves the knight in, that's not going to do a whole lot of good. Let's do that first. And we force these exchanges. Okay, let's back up a bit. Knight knight comes out this way. The queen's got to move somewhere. Move the queen. And then there's a discovered check hiding here. So there's a couple ways of looking at it. But that's out of a 1936 correspondence game. Well, I hope you like these examples. I try to keep these videos not getting too long. And again, I hope you have a lot of fun playing the game. I think chess is more of an art and a science more than it is just a game. There's these magnificent maneuvers with the pieces that are just really cool. Look for more videos. This again, Mike Koplitz from the Chess Room saying happy chess.